What's up, everyone? Tara Roberts here with Fantasy Pros with my top 10 waiver wire ads for week 10. Before we get started, struggling with fantasy punishments this year? We've got you covered. Give the last place loser in your league the trophy they deserve by immortalizing their epic fail with Trophy Smack's teeny tiny loser title belt. This mini title belt has loser written all over it, literally. To win this belt, all you need to do is subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel right now, drop a comment below on this video, and that's it. We'll be announcing the winner right here on the channel, so make sure you turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new videos are up and to claim your prize. Now let's go ahead and dive right in. Number 10, Quinton Johnson. It's tough to include Monday night players in this video because I filmed this video for you on Sunday night. But occasionally there are times where I will go out on a limb and do a preemptive ad before the game even happens, and this is one of those times. There is a valid reason why I'm recommending Quinton Johnson before I even know the Monday night outcome. Josh Palmer is on IR. Johnston is the next logical leap to wide receiver 2 behind Keenan Allen. Johnston's best game came last week where he saw his highest snap count, targets and receptions, and highest fantasy output, which was a mild 10 fantasy points in PPR, but it's a step in the right direction. Now, I don't really expect much out of Johnston in this game, but if he has a big game, move him up the list. But if this is another underwhelming performance, understand that this is one of the most difficult matchups that a receiver can face. We're not investing in Johnston for this performance against the New York Jets. We're investing in him because with Mike Williams out for the rest of the year and Josh Palmer on IR, we'll have 4 straight weeks of Johnston being the second look from one of the league's best quarterbacks. Number 9, Will Levis. I'm not sure people truly understand how dire of a situation we've got at quarterback, and Will Levis is a strong streaming option for week 10. I don't have the updated numbers from week 9, but I'm guessing this probably sticks here. Sam Howell is a top 10 quarterback. That's how crazy this season has been at quarterback. You're far better off abandoning guys like Jonnu Smith and just going for those crazy high upside swings at quarterback, and Will Levis is one of those high upside swings. If you're just looking at the box score, you'll be unimpressed. It would look much different without that huge deep ball drop by Taj Spears. But Levis performed well on a short week against a defense that has really pulled itself together over the past few weeks. But this week, Levis gets Tampa Bay. The Bucs have been an overall pass-friendly matchup, allowing over 300 yards in 3 of the past 4 matchups. Levis has good matchups in weeks 11 and 12. If Levis is named the starting quarterback, he is a high-end QB2 in a very, very short on-quality quarterback week. Number 8, Jaden Reed. Jaden Reed led the Packers receiving corps in week 9 with 3 receptions for 19 yards and 1 carry for 21 yards. It's wild that that resulted in the most fantasy points for a Packers receiver in that game, but I promise, it did. Reed hasn't had any massive games since his big week 2 touchdown performance, but he's had steady involvement in the Packers offense, and that involvement could grow next week. Christian Watson suffered yet again another injury on Sunday, opening the door for increased production for the remainder of the Packers receiving corps. Christian Watson has been quite possibly the most disappointing player of the season with a total of 11 receptions on a short season due to injury. Jaden Reed could contribute to your fantasy team next week. Number 7, Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith remains low rostered, and the primary reason is that we don't want to acknowledge the reality of the Falcons' offense. And that is not criticism of anyone because I do it too. It's tough to admit that Kyle Pitts is yielding production to Jonnu Smith, but it's time that we admit that Smith is tight end 13 in total points in PPR and tight end 17 in average points per game through week 8, and that average is only going to go up after his week 9 performance of 5 receptions for 100 yards and a touchdown, a whopping 21 fantasy points in PPR. And if you remove his week 1 performance where he wasn't targeted, the numbers are even crazier. Smith is a borderline tight end 1. This week's numbers were no doubt assisted by the absence of Drake London, but Smith's usage has been very consistent for the most part. He's a fine streaming option at tight end. Number 6, Kalo Shakir. We talked about Kalo Shakir last week, and I recommended Shakir as a waiver wire ad because I think his production will stick as long as Dawson Knox is out. In week 9, he caught all 4 of his targets for 57 yards. Dalton Kincaid is thriving as the full-time tight end, and that has opened up the slot for Shakir, and while his production hasn't been mind-blowing, it has been consistent. Deontay Hardy was presumed to take on an increased role in the slot this season, but for the second week in a row, he has taken a clear backseat to Shakir, and Shakir has a stronghold on that slot role. He should hover around 10 fantasy points per game, with a little bit more upside making him a fine waiver wire add. Number 5, Taj Spears. Spears is settling into a clear backup role after weeks of speculation that he could step into a lead back role with Derrick Henry on the trade block. But that didn't happen, and Henry remains the RB1. Spears is still earning a strong snap count and outsnapped Derrick Henry in week 9, but ultimately the snaps aren't really leading to huge production because the valuable touches remain with Derrick Henry. But we've got enough of a sample size and visual evidence to show that Spears is extremely high upside handcuff if Derrick Henry were to go down with an injury. This isn't like the Arizona backfield where a man goes down and the next man up is basically throwing a hope and prayer. The Titans' RB1 is high value, potentially even higher if Will Levis pans out. This is the point in the season where we start to secure high-end handcuffs. Add Taj Spears. Number 4, DeMario Douglas. DeMario Douglas was on my waiver wire list last week, and he will remain on my waiver wire list until he is over 50% rostered. I truly believe Douglas is the most ideal wide receiver 1 for the New England Patriots, with Kendrick Bourne lost for the season. Mac Jones was very disappointing in what should have been a strong matchup, but Douglas made the most of what he got with 5 receptions on 7 targets for 55 yards. The targets were spread around very evenly, 7 to both Douglas and Juju Smith-Schuster, 6 to Jalen Reagor, 4 to Kalo Smith, but Douglas was visibly the best receiver in the receiving corps and should continue to solidify this role within the Patriots offense. The Patriots face the Colts, and while the Colts are coming off a strong defensive performance, they've typically been a layup matchup. And the remainder of their schedule after the bye week for the New England Patriots is overall very friendly. Number 3, Joshua Dobbs. After being on the Vikings for less than a week, Joshua Dobbs put on one of the most impressive and unforgettable performances of the season. Dobbs does not know the Vikings offense. Dobbs didn't even prepare as the QB1 for the week. The Vikings planned to sit Dobbs and start Jaren Hall, but Hall suffered a concussion earlier in the game, and Dobbs was forced into a spot start, and the result was 3 total touchdowns and nearly 25 fantasy points. Dobbs isn't perfect, but again, we are not looking for perfection with waiver wire quarterbacks. We are looking for quarterbacks that have real touchdown equity, and Dobbs has that through the air and on the ground. Dobbs has had a rushing touchdown for 3 straight weeks. Next week's matchup is against New Orleans, and it's not ideal, but you can score on them. Dobbs' rushing upside will make up for any of those pesky turnovers that tend to happen against New Orleans. Number 2, Katon Mitchell. Go into this with realistic expectations, but we cannot ignore Katon Mitchell's 138-yard performance on 9 carries with 1 touchdown. I say go into this with realistic expectations because it's not as if Mitchell has taken over the backfield. This has been and will continue to be a committee. Running back by committee is working very well for the Ravens, and they have zero incentive to abandon their game plan. Gus Edwards had 5 carries for 52 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's a total of 6 touchdowns over the past 3 games. Justice Hill had 13 carries for 40 yards, and while he didn't have a catch this week, he's typically been the receiving back. All of the running backs will likely play a role and contribute here. Lamar Jackson has only had 1 rushing touchdown over the past 5 games, and the running backs are producing. Mitchell could be a regular contributor to the rotation, and with his explosive capabilities, 5 to 10 carries is enough to justify a roster spot. Number 1, Zack Charbonnet. Zack Charbonnet just barely qualifies, but he is under 50% rostered in both Yahoo leagues and ESPN leagues, and if he is available in your league, put in your claim right now. Week 9 was ugly for Seattle as a whole. Kenneth Walker and Zack Charbonnet combined for 5 fantasy points, and yet somehow that was still more fantasy points than Jonnu Smith had. Baltimore's defense is real, so we are giving the backfield a pass on overall production here. But the key here is that Charbonnet outsnapped Walker for the 2nd week in a row. Last week I could make the excuse that it was injury related, with Walker dealing with a calf injury. This week, I could make the excuse that it was a massive blowout, so that doesn't really favor a running back like Kenneth Walker in any scenario, but at some point we have to stop finding excuses and buy into the possibility that Charbonnet has earned an increased role. I'm not panicking over Walker, but I am rostering Charbonnet to see what happens. Thanks for watching this video. And remember, struggling with fantasy punishments this year? We've got you covered. Give the last place loser in your league the trophy they deserve by immortalizing their epic fail with Trophy Smack's teeny tiny loser title belt. This mini title belt has loser written all over it, literally. To win, all you need to do is subscribe to the FantasyPros YouTube channel right now. Drop a comment below on this video and that's it. We'll be announcing the winner right here on the channel, so make sure you turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to claim your prize.